Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, a momentous week as President Trump strengthens ties with the Gulf states and returns to the U.S. with signed agreements worth trillions. Plus, analysis from experts as well as everyday Jerusalemites. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. U.S. President Donald Trump made a game-changing trip to the Gulf states this week, and he announced the series of bold economic and political initiatives that will have a major impact on the region, the U.S. and Israel. He also warned Tehran that time is running out to reach an agreement on its nuclear program. Here's the series of events from this historic visit. On Wednesday in Saudi Arabia, President Trump met with Syria's new leader just one day after announcing he's lifting sanctions on the country. The move came amidst a flurry of other activity when the president signed a deal worth hundreds of billions of dollars with the Saudi kingdom, encouraged the crown prince to recognize Israel, and issued a new warning to Iran. The deals with Saudi Arabia amount to about $600 billion, including a $142 billion arms agreement. At the Saudi Investor Conference, President Trump said he hopes Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords.
It's my fervent hope, wish, and even my dream that Saudi Arabia, a place I have such respect for, especially over the last fairly short period of time, what you've been able to do, but will soon be joining the Abraham Accords. But it will be a special day in the Middle East with the whole world watching when Saudi Arabia joins us, and you'll be greatly honoring me, and you'll be greatly honoring all of those people that have fought so hard for the Middle East, and I really think it's going to be something special, but you'll do it in your own time.
He also criticized the regime in Tehran and blamed it for much of the turmoil in the Middle East.
The biggest and most destructive of these forces is the regime in Iran, which has caused unthinkable suffering in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Iraq, Yemen, and beyond.
And he issued an ultimatum.
I want to make a deal with Iran. If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy if we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure, drive Iranian oil exports to zero like I did before, and take all action required to stop the regime from ever having a nuclear weapon. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon.
Trump also announced the U.S. has taken steps to normalize relations with Syria and will lift sanctions at the urging of Saudi Crown Prince bin Salman and Turkish President Erdogan. In his meeting with Syrian President al-Shara Wednesday, Trump encouraged him to join the Abraham Accords and to tell all foreign terrorists to leave Syria. However, some question if al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda commander, can be trusted.
He don't change. His speak may be moderate, but particularly in facts, he is a radical Sunni man. I talked to people, this radical group, they said we will make our country Islamic Republic.
Cito says minorities in Syria are fearful of the new government.
We need protection. All these countries supported radical Islam, radical Sunni groups in Syria. We are in fear. They have to help us to protect us for radical Islam.
During Wednesday's state dinner in Qatar, Trump called on the emir to use his influence with Iran to help make a deal and warned time is running out for Iran to make a decision.
I mean, we have two courses. There's only two courses. There aren't 3 or 4 or 5. There's 2. There's a friendly and a non-friendly. And the non-friendly is a violent course, and I don't want that. I'll say it up front. I don't want that. But they have to get moving.
A recent report from NBC News says Iran is ready to make concessions in its nuclear program in exchange for lifting sanctions. The report quotes a top nuclear advisor to the Ayatollah as saying Iran would commit to not making nuclear weapons, disposing of its highly enriched uranium, and allow international inspectors to supervise its process of enriching uranium for civilian use. However, Iran's president publicly criticized President Trump's statements and says his country will not bow to any bully. Trump and Sheikh Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, signed both economic and defense agreements. Al Thani called Trump's visit historic.
I think after signing these documents, we are going to another level of relationship between Qatar and the United States. So I just wanted to thank you, Mr. President, again for this historic visit.
There are also concerns about the U.S. moving closer to a country known for supporting terror groups. In 2022, the Biden administration designated Qatar as a major non-NATO ally, a designation that carries military and economic privileges. Qatar also hosts CENTCOM, the largest U.S. base in the Middle East. But Yigal Karmon, founder of Memory.org, says Qatar also hosted Hamas leaders for years, sponsors Islamist terror, and helped build up Hamas.
Qatar gave them billions of dollars over the years. They became a tiny empire, military empire. All the missiles to Tel Aviv, all the almost 40,000 weapon holders, killers, all the drones, all the motorcycles, what have you, all their equipment, everything, every single missile is Qatar. So Qatar is Hamas, Hamas is Qatar. They go together.
CBN's Raj Nair spoke with Middle East analyst Eric Stackelbeck about President Trump hoping Syria's new president will join the Abraham Accords.
Does he have nefarious intentions towards Israel, or could he truly join the Abraham Accords? In my experience, Raj, covering this for a long time, being on the ground in the region and even interviewing terrorists and former terrorists, the jihadi leopard usually doesn't change its spots. Let's hope that it's different in Syria. President Trump taking a big chance here, but he's doing it at the behest of those Gulf leaders, the Saudis, the Qataris, the UAE. They wanted Syria to join the community of nations.
Trump told reporters on Air Force One that despite the fact he's not traveling to Israel, he's not sidelining the Jewish state.
This is good for Israel. Having a relationship like I have with these countries, Middle Eastern countries, essentially all of them, I think it's very good for Israel.
President Trump ended his Middle East trip to the UAE Thursday.
Israel is reportedly quietly opening diplomatic channels with the new Syrian regime after President Trump met with the new Syrian leader Ahmed al-Shara in Saudi Arabia and lifted sanctions against the country. Celebrations broke out in Damascus, and al-Shara hailed the move as historic and courageous. President Trump extended an invitation to al-Shara to join the Abraham Accords, and he reportedly said yes, paving the way for Israeli security officials and Syrian regime officials to meet in Azerbaijan about the possibility of the Arab country joining the Abraham Accords. Regional players are interested in pulling Syria out of the grip of Iran, which propped up the former regime of Bashar al-Assad for years. Trump received a warm welcome from United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Trump signed more business deals for the U.S. He left the palace in Abu Dhabi after a state dinner on Thursday evening, his last night in the Middle East. In Doha, where talks are taking place for the release of the hostages, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, told other mediators that the U.S. doesn't plan to force Israel to end the war in Gaza. Many Israelis were concerned by President Trump's meetings, deals, and offers to leaders that Israel doesn't have good relations with. But Elie Pieprz of the Israel Defense and Security Forum says he believes Trump is a huge friend of Israel, and Trump is just trying to project a strong American foreign policy.
That doesn't mean that President Trump doesn't value the interests of its strong ally, Israel. And I think President Trump has made it clear that values Israel as an ally, sees Israel and the U.S. fighting the same war against the same enemies.
Israelis in Jerusalem had mixed feelings about Trump's visit.
I'm happy he's in the region. I'm not happy he didn't visit Israel. I mean, you have to take it a little bit of an affront. I'm grateful that he released, that Idan Alexander released.
He's going to do big business over there, so I don't think it's got to do with Israel, anything, because he's a friend of Israel.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
As you saw in our last news update, Israeli reactions to President Trump's Middle East trip range from criticism to support. Here are some more thoughts from folks in Jerusalem, as captured by our Middle East correspondent, Julie Stahl, and our crew.
So what do you think about President Trump's visit to the Middle East?
I'm afraid of it. It doesn't smell good for Israel. He's doing very good things for the Middle East. He tried to make peace between the countries, and I hope they succeed.
I think he's doing things behind Israel's back for his own interest, and that's fine. But I think in this, our prime minister failed.
In one side, I believe in him because he's support Israel, but in the other side, it's look like his benefit. It's more important to him than to bring us our kidnapped hope.
It's very dramatic. Definitely very dramatic, and it seems that might be actually some very good results. But again, with Trump, you never know.
Will it be good for Israel?
He will be good more. Step by step, it will be okay.
To tell you the truth, it's impossible to know because Trump is unpredictable. He can suddenly change. Tomorrow he can be a friend of Israel's. Today he's not a friend of Israel's, apparently.
I think it's great. The more peaceful Arab neighbors we have, the better our life is here. I'm running to the shelter every day. It's not fun. Very hard to explain to Americans who live in America what it's like to live in a state of war. You know, thank God there's an Iron Dome. If there weren't, this place would be decimated. So.
If he succeeds making a ceasefire and get the hostages out, it will be a very good thing for Israel.
I think that a people that believes in God and goes in the way of God will manage. Because of this, I say this about Trump. Every leader that works on behalf of the Jewish people goes in the way of God, God will work on his behalf.
What do you think the way forward is for Israel?
We must stop the war, and we try to make peace with other countries.
First of all, stop the war in exchange for all the hostages. Return all the hostages home. And if he wants to go to war against Hamas after all the hostages are home, I have no problem with that.
In a perfect world, all our neighbors would be peaceful with us. But if they're not, you have to fight back. Like I said, I'm a big believer in peace through strength.
Got to get the 2 million Arabs out of Gaza. You can't rebuild it. Israel can't go on this way.
I believe we need to be together and not to fight each other, because we are one nation and one religion, and we need to stay together.
So, was President Trump's visit to the Middle East good for Israel or not? Military expert Elie Pieprz shared his thoughts about the trip and the stop in Saudi Arabia in specific with our correspondent Julie Stahl in our Jerusalem studio. Take a look.
Elie Pieprz, thank you for joining us on Jerusalem Dateline. Now, President Trump has supposedly made this deal with Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is not really a friend of Israel's, though there's been talk of maybe it joining the Abraham Accords. How should Israel be viewing this huge deal with Saudi Arabia?
I think Israel views this deal with a certain amount of caution. Anytime arms are coming into the Middle East, even if we have a friendly regime right now, who knows what that regime will look like in 5, 10, 20 years from now. The first round of Abraham Accords, it was so out of the blue. Nobody was thinking about it other than the Trump administration. And it was this unique relationship between Israel, the Gulf countries that made the peace, made the normalization, and the US. What Saudi is getting right now seems to be a lot of the things that they had wanted in a potential normalization with Israel, in that agreement, a three-way deal. And in some ways, you could say, well, this is very problematic. Saudis are getting all of the things that they wanted from the U.S., but they haven't had to make the offer of normalizing ties with Israel. The reason why I think ultimately it is actually beneficial is that long-term, when Israel and Saudi Arabia normalize relations, it needs to be seen. This is not because they were coerced by the big brother, the U.S. It's because it was a Saudi Arabian interest to normalize a relation with Israel. Not because they needed anything else. Everything else was already given to them. And I think that what's happening is that within the Arabian Peninsula, there are many more countries that understand that their future needs to be tethered to Israel. It'd be nice to get some other benefits from the U.S., some credibility from the U.S., maybe some weapons from the U.S., but ultimately the most important thing is that normalization. And when normalization between Saudi and maybe some other countries comes with Israel, whether it's this year, whether it's in 5 years or 10 years, that's the momentum, that's the trajectory that we're on. When it happens, it will be clear is because those countries' interests is in tethering their future together with Israel, and that needs to be clear.
Now, Saudi Arabia has said publicly that they'll only join the Abraham Accords if Israel commits to a Palestinian state. And now Mahmoud Abbas, PA president, is in Saudi Arabia with President Trump there. How should Israel be viewing all this?
So, the great question, and I think there is some confusion about the Saudi Arabia's position on the Palestinians, and certainly I am not going to speak for Saudi Arabia, but I think from the conversation that I'm having and that I'm aware that others are having, it's not that the Saudi Arabians want to create a Palestinian state. It's that the Saudi Arabians don't want to do anything that harms the Palestinian narrative, which there's a lot of empathy and sympathy amongst the Saudi public for the plight of the Palestinians. And frankly, you look putting October 7th aside, which is very hard to do in Israel, but if you just look from the humanitarian perspective, certainly there are people who are caught up, and in any violent conflict, there are many, many casualties, and it creates a certain amount of sympathy throughout the Middle East. That's understandable. But ultimately, if there is going to be a normalization between the between Israel and the Saudi Arabia, which I believe, and I believe the Saudis believe, is in their interest, they cannot allow a powerful and influential Palestinian narrative to constantly be able to rise its head and try to throw a wrench into the works. So creating a Palestinian state actually is extremely problematic, because unless you really think that a Palestinian state is going to be benevolent, is going to be peaceful, is going to live alongside Israel, which nobody really believes, that you'll have a Palestinian state that has all of the legitimacy of a nationality in international arenas, and they would have a lot of influence to be able to stop or to at least hinder the growing ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. So it's not that they want to help create a Palestinian state. They want Israel to resolve the Palestinian conflict, which does not need to end in a state. But right now, one of the ways they can do so without giving a state is give some respect to Mahmoud Abbas. They don't want to be perceived in the Arab world as undermining the Palestinian narrative.
Elie Pieprz, thank you so much for your insights.
Our friend and former IDF international spokesman, Doron Spielman, has just written a book that some might consider dangerous because it refutes the narrative that Jews in Israel are colonizers. It's called When the Stones Speak, and he explained why its message is thought to be so disruptive. Doron Spielman, great to be with you again. You wrote a book called When the Stones Speak, The Remarkable Discovery of the City of David and What Israelis' Enemies Don't Want You to Know. We go back 20 years or more. We've been doing interviews there at the City of David. So why did you write the book?
Chris, you know, you and I have seen things, and I think your audience has seen things that around the rest of the world they haven't seen. Yeah. Which is that there's an incredible gem that has come to life after thousands of years, which is the actual city of Jerusalem from the Bible. And that is not what we thought was the old city. It's the small city of David founded by King David outside the walls of the old city. And with all the biblical discoveries that have brought the Bible to life, things like the seals from the book of Jeremiah and evidence of King David, there has been an attempt, as we know, by certain people who've tried to hush this story. They don't want the Bible to come to life because they feel if the Bible comes to life, then Israel comes to life. And these are people who are against Israel. The reason I wrote the book, Chris, is because every time you reach in the ground and you have a piece of pottery and it sends out a shockwave to Israel's enemies, the rest of the world needs to know the truth. And this is the truth that they didn't want us to know.
How does what you've been discovering for the last 20 years or more in the city of David, how does that refute what they've been claiming?
I'll give you one example. So we have the seal from the Bible, from the book of Jeremiah, of the minister of King Zedekiah who tried to kill the prophet. Now, we have his name, Yuchal ben Shlemiah, in ancient Hebrew from beneath the ground. His name was found from a tablet that was written 1,200 years before Islam. Now, if you're right now teaching an entire Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, teaching an entire generation of Palestinians and Arabs throughout the Middle East, that the Jews are colonizers in their land, how can I be colonizing my land if I was here thousands of years before Islam was even created? And so while we love to dig, and we want to dig everywhere because we want the stones to speak, we want to let them speak, Israel's enemies, that is the most dangerous message for them because it calls out their lie. It calls out the narrative that the Palestinians have been here forever, which is not true, and that the Jews are newcomers. We are not newcomers. When you listen to the stones speak, we go back to the time of the Bible, and it's happening today in Israel.
The seal is one thing, but there's been some amazing discoveries, including the Pool of Siloam, and talk about some of the really major ones, not just that's minor, but there's some amazing excavations going on in the city of David, even today.
There are, and I will tell you, from the Pool of Siloam, we found the most miraculous discovery in the city of David, I think, which is the underground thoroughfare, the road that led you from that pool all the way up those stone steps into the gates of the temple. It's like walking into the gates of heaven. And you walk along this road, and we're digging it day by day, and there's homes off to the side. And one of our excavators reached down and pulled out of the ground a golden bell with the chime in it. I was one of the first people to hold it in my hands. And that golden bell is written about in the book of Exodus, where it talks about the high priest in the temple, in the precinct of temple, in the holiest day of the year, next to the Ark of the Covenant. He wore a garment that had bells on them. We found the actual bell of the high priest of Jerusalem on the pilgrimage road right next to the temple. I mean, what could be better than this? And that's one of many, many discoveries that have been uncovered, that when you open the Bible and you walk, it's not just reading, it's literally alive. It's real. And that is what the city of David is. That's why I've written the book, because every person has a calling. And when you are in the city of David, you listen to those stones, they're telling stories. They haven't forgotten. They were covered. They waited for thousands of years, but now that Israel's right to the land is being challenged, now they're being unearthed. If that's not God, I don't know what is God.
As a Jew, when you hold the bell, when you see all these things, how does it make you feel?
You know what I said to my kids? They asked me a similar question. What does all this mean? They saw the book. I said, you know what it means? You're not here because of 1948, the Independence War. You're not here because of some Balfour Declaration or the United Nations. We are here because we were here from the time of the Bible. We are living a continuum in the state of Israel today. This country is not 77 years old. It's 3,000 years old. And when you realize that, then you're willing to fight and, if need be, die for this country. And that's what this means for me.
Final question. What do you want people to take away, and how can they get the book?
So the book is available. It's released today. It's on Amazon. It's in your local bookstores. You can buy it, and you should buy it because the publisher was very brave in publishing such a pro-Israel book. What you take away from this is a sense of strength of those who defend the Bible. There's an assault on the Bible. And the city of David is the most dangerous thing for those deniers. Each one of us has a mission. This is the story they didn't want us to tell. Pick up the book and read it, and then tell the story about the Bible. Talk about the proof. Talk about the fact that Jews, and by extension, Christianity and Western values, are indigenous to the state of Israel. That's the message, that we were here and we are home now.
Well, congratulations on the book, Doron. Great job.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can access CBN content through our CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can receive information on breaking news. And please keep praying for Israel at this critical time, for wisdom for our leaders, for IDF soldiers, and all those caught in harm's way, and for all of the hostages to come home safely. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.